Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Sangeeta about helping employers attract and retain STEM plus women. Sangeeta, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
It is a pleasure to have you on today. I'm super excited to be exploring a really important topic with you. We're going to be talking about helping employers attract and retain STEM plus women in the workplace. Super important, super timely. And while it's always been an important conversation to have and something that we need to be working towards, greater parity and greater diversity and involvement, especially in STEM fields. I think it's particularly important right now because of the setback that the pandemic has had on women's equity issues in the workplace. Some reports have suggested that it's set us back even a generation. And so that's disheartening, but there are things we can do. And so I'm excited to explore that with you. As we get started, I wanted to share Sangeeta's bio with everybody. At 29, Sangeeta was at the end of her rope, about to quit a STEM career she loved because she couldn't navigate the roadblocks that were being thrown in front of her as a woman, as an immigrant, as a person of color. Luckily, a mentor reached out, guided her, and she stayed in her career for another 2 decades, achieving 26 patents and leading global teams of 5,000 plus with budgets of more than 200 million. She has mentored other STEM women, but could only help one woman at a time. That's why she is building a scalable for-profit career advice platform. 30 plus million STEM women around the world have access to the advice they need from top professionals to stick with their careers and thrive. Today, she can lead her global company because of the early leadership, business, and life lessons she learned, first as a scientist with GE, then as a director of marketing and various managerial positions with GE Aviation, then as global head of data science and chief diversity officer with Nielsen, then as VP of connections with Amazon, all thanks to her sponsor who reached out in the very beginning. That is such a wonderful background, wonderful story. I'm excited to pick your brain, learn more about what we can do about all of this. Anything else you would like listeners to know about you, your background, before we launch on into the conversation?
I think you covered it really well. The only thing that I would add is obviously our platform is for women in STEM plus. We do have programs with the employers who can sponsor these women to go through this program so they can retain them. That's all that I wanted to add.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. So as we launch on in, why don't you describe for us a little bit more about your experience, if you don't mind sharing, in terms of some of those roadblocks you face, because you are a good example, of someone who, especially considering the time frame in which you were trying to navigate. I think we still have a lot to work through and a lot to improve on, but it is better now than it was, decades ago. So tell us a little bit more about that, the challenges of navigating that you faced, and then we can start to pick apart, like, what specifically can we do as leaders, as advocates, as mentors, as allies today to help women in STEM plus fields.
So that's a good point. Things have definitely improved. And I think employers have done a good job of recruiting women into a variety of fields. Retention still is an issue. I think that is something that we are all learning together. And if I talk about my own experiences, I grew up in the engineering and sciences world, right from college to my first job, and later jobs in aviation and energy and tech industries. And I might be the only woman in many meetings that I went to. And to me, that just became a very common thing. I just didn't think about it as being the only person in the room. If I had thought about it, I would have never succeeded. So that was the first part. The second part was the hurdles that I faced especially during my early career. And in those days, I didn't even know what networking meant, what was coaching, networking, mentoring, or sponsoring. And every now and then you would get into a situation that would be very sensitive from the perspective whether it is business related, who is on one side versus the other, and making a decision that may make some people in the company, in the organization you're in, very happy, other people not so happy. How do you navigate some of those things? And most of the business related stuff, I was able to create a network of mentors where I could go to. But when it came to the sensitive topics, I just squirmed and I just stressed myself out and I wanted to quit. I thought I might get fired because I took a stance, which was pretty strong stance in some cases, and it was right. But at the same time, very stressful also. So the journey was very lonely. And if I had something like Gotara, it would have actually helped me tremendously. I would not have been stressed and I would not be thinking about quitting my career.
Yeah. And, I can only imagine. I'm a straight cisgendered white dude. So, I have all the privilege and I hear these types of experiences and stories, and my heart breaks for people who have had to endure these sorts of things. And I'm glad you persisted. I'm glad that you endured, and I'm glad that you had someone who stepped forward as a mentor for you and assisted. And it really does speak to the necessity and the need for that, right? And I think especially in this space, in STEM plus fields, where it's so male dominated, like you said, companies have gotten better at the attraction and bringing women into the workplace. There's still a lot of work to do there, but it's improved quite a bit. But the retention piece is abysmal. And if we're going to move the needle there, there's a lot of continued attention we're going to have to put towards broken systems, inequities, disrupting systems that need to be disrupted, and rebuilding in a way that's going to be, truly embrace this diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation that we've all been having in recent years.
Yeah. And one other thing that I wanted to add was, despite, things have changed definitely since the time I was growing in my career, but despite not having all the network and mentors and things like that, I was just simply lucky for having a sponsor. I didn't even know what a sponsor meant at the time, but the senior leader, a corporate officer, and GE reached out to me and asked me to take a new role. And I was like scared, like I'm changing my fields. Is this the right thing to do and not? And he was the one who helped me grow in the company. And I just got lucky. If I didn't have him, I don't know where I would be today. So I'm very thankful.
Yeah. And it reminds me, especially when we have these sorts of gaps, whether it be gender gaps or racial, ethnic gaps, whatever, the sort of gap that we experience in our workplace, those on the margins aren't in a position to really fight for themselves very well for parity and equity. It really does take advocates and allies to step in and to help involve people at a greater level, to help move people into leadership roles or new opportunities. And so to hear about this, example of your mentor is wonderful. And it just reminds me of how much I need to do. I need to try to do more, and how all of us, anyone listening, think about what can you do to help the next generation of women in your field, to help them be successful. And we have to be pretty proactive about it. It's not something that's going to passively happen. And again, some of those privileges that I might experience as a man in my field, I just need to stop, pause, recognize that women probably don't have those same sorts of advantages oftentimes. And that means if we're going for equity, it means we have to be more proactive, more assertive, more aggressive in trying to make sure that we're bridging the gap.
Yeah, I would highly recommend for allies that reach out, identify a few people that you really want to sponsor and mentor. I think you'd be doing a huge service to those individuals and to the society in general.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So tell us more about some of the challenges you've seen in terms of STEM plus women in the industries in terms of this retention piece. We've referred to it a couple times now. It's a problem.
Yeah.
What exactly is going on there, and how do we start to tackle it?
Yeah. So I think before really deep diving into this topic, general theme that I have read and felt was you need to have great benefits. You need to have flexibility for women. You need to have role models, stuff like that. And yes, that is important for women. And I think they look for companies which have that. However, when they're leaving or stagnating in their roles, the main causes that we have collected this data, behavioral data on our platform, are they're being undervalued, they're being bullied, they don't have self-improvement opportunities, and they're being dumped at work. So we talk a lot about work-life balance. This is just all about work. They are being dumped at work to do stuff that's not part of their scope of job. And those are the reasons why it happens once, it happens twice, it happens a few times, then they just write it off and they decide, okay, I'm not going to be staying in this company and I'm going to move on to another organization. And you've lost them. And they're not going to share this information with you because they don't want to burn bridges. You never know if you have to come back to this company again, or if you have to work with this manager again. Even if you don't want to, sometimes mergers and acquisitions bring you together. And rightly so. I think it's the right decision that they're making for themselves. And I have done the same thing. When I have left for a reason, I'm not going to give them the reason. We are going to talk about compensation. We're going to talk about the opportunity. That's why people are leaving. Those are the two reasons every time an exit interview happens at any organization. That's what you hear. You do not hear anything about toxic culture. So as a result, majority of the employers don't even know. If they know, it's not being talked about. And many times, employers can't police every conversation that is happening in the company. So they just don't know, and they're losing women.
I'm excited to announce the publication of my new book from HCI Press, Bluer Than Indigo Leadership: The Journey of Becoming a Truly Remarkable Leader. Early in my adult life, I learned about an Asian proverb that translates as bluer than indigo. If you think about the color indigo, it is a brilliant, deep, and vibrant blue, what some would call the bluest of blues. To have something that is bluer than indigo is rare and truly remarkable. Contrary to popular myth, there is no one-size-fits-all or cookie-cutter approach to effective leadership. There's no silver bullet, no secret sauce, no go-to model that will solve all of our problems. The truth is, great leaders have all had their unique strengths and flaws, and have all had to discover and then pave their own distinctive path in their life's journey to fulfill their leadership potential. Bluer Than Indigo Leadership will help you discover your own path and explore those ordinary, everyday actions that will help you respond to an uncertain future and produce extraordinary results for individuals, teams, and organizations. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think many organizations really don't do a good job with exit interviewing anyways. And so you have people leaving. Oftentimes those conversations really aren't even happening anyways. But if they are happening, does someone feel like they can truly be completely forthcoming. And the conventional wisdom is, well, yeah, because they're leaving the organization, so there's no reason why they would hold back, and they're going to be willing to unleash. But you've just articulated something super important in a flaw in that reasoning, and that is, especially for women, your network is super important, and you may not have the same extensive network as, say, men who are in similar positions, and so you have to cultivate that, and you really could be shooting yourself in the foot for future opportunities if you really truly open up, and especially if you start talking about toxic culture, sexism, racism, those sorts of things that you experience. People don't like hearing that. People will do and say bigoted, sexist, racist things. You call them on it, and they're like, I'm not a bigot, I'm not a racist, I'm not a sexist, even though everything they did indicates that at least in that area they are. That's it. It can't be addressed if people immediately put up walls and barriers, and they're not willing to truly be introspective and understand the experience and the perspective of the person being brave enough to share what they have experienced. And I've seen it over and over and over again in organizations I've worked with. People who are, overall good people, well-meaning people. It's not like they're walking around trying to hurt everyone around them, but they do and say racist, sexist, bigoted things on occasion. And if that happens, that creates that toxic culture. It needs to be addressed. If it's not addressed, we're going to perpetuate a problem. And that's why we have this retention issue. One of the many reasons, I guess, why we have this retention issue.
And many times I would add to that is sometimes an individual manager or a leader actually behaves well as a good leader, and they don't see that issue because they are a good leader. However, they don't see some of the defects around them for whatever reason, and so it just goes unchecked because you don't feel like any of this kind of stuff is happening. And so you as a leader have to be cognizant of the fact that you have to be either observant yourself or open to inputs when people provide that input, that it could be true, even though you may not be like a leader like that.
Yeah, it absolutely can be true. And I think you have to believe people and their experience and what they say. And there's always two sides to every story. I'm not saying that we don't investigate, that we don't try to look into things. Of course we should, and we always do. But especially if you have a persistent retention problem and you tend to see all of the women leaving your area, that says something. It says something very important. And if you're not willing to take a good hard look at that, then there's no way you're going to be able to solve that problem or fix it.
Sure.
So let's talk more about this in terms of the Great Resignation. The labor market right now is really tight. It's hard for employers to find good talent, generally speaking, especially in STEM plus fields. It's even more challenging. And I imagine, especially since women have been disproportionately negatively impacted by the pandemic and taking on additional home and care responsibilities and those sorts of things, it's probably even a heightened challenge for women in STEM fields for organizations right now, being able to attract good people. So what can organizations do? What do we need to be doing in order to better prepare and support women during this Great Resignation, not just for any role, but also specifically for even leadership roles?
Very good question. It's a problem that all of us are facing right now with the Great Resignation. And even before the Great Resignation came into play, STEM plus women leave their careers at the rate of 40% within their first 5 to 7 years. So imagine what it is like with the pandemic, with the high demand of talent, and with companies trying to actually improve their gender metrics. So from every angle you can think of, it is becoming harder for people to work on that, to recruit people. So what I would recommend employers is really invest in the people you have. Sometimes we're just so busy recruiting. Sometimes our budgets, half of our HR budgets are on recruiting. Great. But what percent of that recruiting budget you're actually spending replacing people because you've lost them? Can you take that budget and actually help retain the people you want to retain? Because it actually costs you less to retain them than to hire new people. And we do our calculation that it costs about $3 million when 10 women leave in the STEM plus field. And some of our solutions give you a really good return on investment for that. But the other thing that I would say, invest in your people. And this is your coveted talent. Technical talent is hard to replace and train. It takes I have been in your shoes in that case where I have lost my talent and it takes 3 to 6 months before we hire them. And it takes another 3 to 6 months for you to train them so they are able to actually produce something. And all of that should be important to the employers. And it's cost savings, and it actually helps the GDP of the organization. I think investing in women in your organization is probably the most important thing. Recruiting is always going to be hard.
Yeah, invest in your people generally is great advice. I think striving to have a people-centric organizational culture, safe, psychologically safe organizational culture, always super important. But particularly if you're talking about women in STEM plus fields, we need to pay even closer attention to all of this, or we're really going to find ourselves hurting in the long run. And I think that's just absolutely true. And the other piece of that question for me, again, is, how do we, as organizational leaders, help to optimize performance and nurture and coach out leadership abilities from our employees, particularly our women in STEM employees?
So I'll share with you what we are trying to offer, and it is really working well with many of our customer employers. We are offering some services that actually help with retention, in the sense that they pick a couple of skills, which is a combination of business technical skills and interpersonal skills, taught in a very data-driven and logical fashion that women in STEM Plus would appreciate. So it's not really soft skills only. It is actually using data to grow the confidence that you want to grow. And it actually resonates really well with the women in these fields because we are using our best practices, where people like me and others who are using our own examples to say, yes, when I was walking the factory floor in this airline, this is what happened, and this is how I handled it. Obviously, I did well and rose to executive rank, so I must have done something right. And so we're using real life examples like that to help with how you could go act. So as a result, what they're learning, they're applying back very quickly. So when you go to a leadership class, and I've heard this many times, hey, if you could just kind of take one takeaway from that leadership class and apply it, that would be great. We expect 80 to 90% of the stuff that we are teaching for them to apply. And they do. We see within 8 weeks, 20 to 60% improvement in their skills. And also, if there are things like, somebody threw me under the bus in a meeting last Wednesday. How do I handle this? Because I don't want to have a reputation that is not so good. And you get an advice from somebody who's lived in your shoes within 24 hours. So this is a combination of just in time and nuggets of advice and training that you can use on the go. So you go apply back to work very quickly, and you learn from it. And as a result, employers learn from it too. What are the things they can do to help retain them? What are the things, what kind of love they need to give to these women to be able to retain them? And what are the things they can do about their culture to retain them? And what are the things they're already doing well, they need to just keep doing and not stop doing? And so those are some of the things that I would say are key to retention.
I love it. I think those are all really important tips. Sangeeta, it has been just a pleasure talking with you. The time has flown by, and I see that we're almost to the end of our time. I need to let you go here in just a minute. But before we close, I wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can get connected with you, find out more about your work, your team, your new initiative underway, and then share the last word on the topic for today.
Yeah. Thank you, John, for the opportunity. And please reach out and to my startup, gotara.com, Gotara.com, and sign up as a member. Check it out. Get your employers to check out our website and see if that would be something that they would be interested in picking up. And the last piece of advice is for the folks in the audience is know that you have the self-confidence. Sometimes women think that they don't have the self-confidence and they have imposter syndrome. Self-confidence is innate in you. You need to turn it on. You already have it.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. I encourage listeners to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Sangeeta can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership. Ordinary, everyday actions that produce extraordinary results. Consider how the nature of work has shifted over the past 50 years. With increased globalization, rapid technological advancement, and the shift in economic composition, the average job of today looks very different than the average job of 50 years ago. What will the jobs and organizations of tomorrow look like? Moreover, what does this all mean for organizational leaders? What are the core competencies and capabilities of organizations and their leadership that are prepared for continued disruption and geopolitical and socioeconomic shifts? Regardless of what the future holds, increasingly, leaders need to be socially minded, data-driven, decisive, champions of talent, and disruptors of the traditional notions of leadership, teams, organizations, and work. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership will help you to explore your own leadership competencies and capabilities and consider ways to apply and implement them into your workplace and personal life. Check out Human Capital Innovations magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine with the mission to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We publish issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Take a look at the latest issue and let us know what you think. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.